Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 12 of the Second Date Show. And again, we do have a really interesting episode. Of course, not like the last two, which was Howard Shaw, Bear McCreary, and Finrod, or actually, we should say, quote, Gladio's brother, because that's still unconfirmed. But toning it down, for this week, but that still does mean quite a lot due to the veracity of the last few weeks' releases. So today we are going to be discussing potential battle and war leaks and stuff like that from the Amazon show. But firstly, joining me, we have Marcel. Hello, my friend. He is going to be joining us as our special guest. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you on. And just quickly for maybe some people who don't know who you are, explain what do you do, etc.
My name is Marcelo Brombulis. I'm called the Tolkienist or the Traveling Tolkienist on the internet. I am the founder of the German Tolkien Society, and I've been around quite a few years now in Tolkien fandom. And what I like to do is, interest people in Tolkien's life and works. And I'll do that from my blog, thetolkienist.com.
Indeed, and make sure to check him out. All his links, I think, to his Twitter will be in the description below. So they do really good stuff, so make sure to check that out. But also, we have Lakitia here today with us as well. Hello.
Hello, good to be here. Happy to have Marcel here tonight with us.
Indeed, and as you can probably tell, we have an omission today, and that is Kyle, who wasn't able to make it, but still three is company. So let's just get right into it. So
can I just say, incidentally, that's my very favorite chapter of the Lord of the Rings.
I thought that'd be a good thing to put in, but let's just get right into it. So, as explained earlier, we're going to be talking some interesting battle and war leaks. So we have two main leaks, or two separate scenes or sequences that we're going to be talking about. Then there'll be some more individual bits in between there as well. So yeah, lots of talk about wars, orcs, etc. So yeah, it's going to be quite an action filled episode. So I think let's just get right into it. So the first one is that exclusive. In Season 1, there was a major battle between Númenórean and Orc armies, which was filmed in late July. It was, quote, "It was on a random battlefield, dead trees, bark/dirt, and sticks all over the place, along with explosions and rocks being catapulted." So that is quite interesting, first of all. And of course, explosions, I think, is more, if a catapult lands onto the ground, the explosion that would create is not physical. I don't think fire explosions and stuff like that. And I think an interesting thing that we did get from the source, it didn't seem like a one-off battle, but more of not like a one-off skirmish, but more of a battle per se. So, Marcel, what's your initial thoughts on this? It does seem quite action-filled, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the thing is, if you've ever taken interest in military history, if you want to have catapults or trebuchets or things like that somewhere around, that's a lot of time and effort and material that you have to bring in there. So that I don't think that's a skirmish just between, let's say a small group of Númenóreans on a patrol or something. But if you put up catapults, then you're in for the long run and the long haul. And there are many more people involved than just, a couple of dozen or something.
Indeed, and I think just lucky to, isn't it, that the inclusion of, for example, it's on the lately we have dead horses reported to be on the floor, not actual dead horses, but of course they've been made by production. But in general, it does seem like a bloody affair happening here.
Yeah, indeed. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. But I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on any, military proceedings, real life or fantasy. But I would agree with Marcel here. Explosions and catapults, that sounds quite big to me. So yeah, not a skirmish, definitely a full-on battle.
And I think another interesting thing to mention is that this was filmed in late July. So that must have been like the last few weeks of filming, because we know filming wrapped in July. So I think...
Yeah, but it might have also been reshoots.
It could have easily been reshoots as well, but we'll just have to wait and see if that had any gravitas to it.
I think it could also be just like, end of the season episode where there's a big battle going on or something like that. Could
Mm-hmm.
easily be
As
that
a
as well.
Well,
potent.
yeah, the good thing is that, I think sometimes with production, they usually what they want to have, if it's a series that is so secretive as Lord of the Rings on Prime, sometimes the big stuff will be pushed towards the end of the production, so things do not leak quite that
Okay.
easily. So, I mean, it could be a reshoot, sure, absolutely, but maybe sometimes the stuff that they really don't want to show first is put at the end of it. So maybe it's the cliffhanger, maybe the season
Yeah.
one sort of end
Mm.
thing might be, because if you want to go out with a bang on the first season, what would be more surprising, than a huge battle of the Numenorians maybe moving in against, Sauron or something.
Indeed, and I think just to add on to what you said, maybe people might be wondering, oh, why is this? Looks like there's so much action, but Amazon did acquire, I think, a 500 million IP for this, so it does make sense that there would be an inclusion of scenes and sequences like this in the show as well. But moving on to the next one, which is included with this one. This isn't the other big one, but this is part of this scene. The Númenórean army included some, quote, royal knights who wore shiny armor with white capes, some being red/blue, alongside with polished steel boots, and some of the soldiers were wearing leather chest pieces. First off, I think of course we have the significance of these particular royal knights, and then we have these white capes. Could you see Númenóreans having white capes and having them like they're on the battlefield? Marcel?
Well, I think my first thought was of, there are a number of really fun 80s and 90s Arthurian films of, you see
Yeah.
knights riding around with
Yeah.
white capes and swords flashing, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
no, because the different families, of course, of the Númenóreans will have their chosen color for their armories, for their weapons, for the horse capes and stuff. So I can easily imagine there's different colors for it. I mean, Gondolin is one of those stories where white, for example, different colors of the houses of
Mm.
Gondolin plays such an important part. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And the thing is, when you said the detail about these leather chess pieces and stuff, I am so happy that Weta Workshop and Weta Digital are there, because if Weta Workshop does stuff for this series, it's just going to look amazing.
Yeah, and I think we could already see that from the movies as well, exactly what you're trying to say. And I think another thing as well, Lakitia, from this description, it said there are some red and blue capes as well. Maybe, are we seeing potentially ranks in maybe the Númenórean army?
Yeah, could be. Although
Just a
I'm more
speculation.
inclined to yeah, I think it could be, but I'm more inclined to think that, like Marcel mentioned, that colors could be attributed to noble
Yeah,
families,
yeah, no,
etc.
and I
Yeah.
think adding on to that, another bit from that, as I get that up in a second, is that there was there we can't I don't think we can mention any characters. We don't know any characters from the set, but there seemed the most prominent figure at this battle scene seemed to be a, quote, dirty white blonde prince, and I know that that's direct from a
Yeah.
source, but I think
Well.
the dirty refers to of course they're in the battle, so it's going to
That's a
be dead.
shame.
Yeah. And
Mm-mm.
then of course the white is in reference to the skin color character, because that's another because of course, just to distinguish. And then he's clearly has blonde
Yeah.
hair, and it's a prince, so
So I
Numenorean
can I
prince.
can I say something? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think a prince necessarily means like a political function here,
Yeah.
but rather somebody of importance
Yeah.
who looks particularly, shiny and dashing. So I
Yeah,
think that could easily be like a
that's a good
general
point.
or just a high-ranking noble
Yeah,
or
we
something.
don't know that it is a prince 100%. It's
Yeah.
just that it's an observation. It looked like someone important. It looked like a main focal figure on that battlefield. So that could easily be a general as well. But so yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I think, Bossa, we will get on to later. Where could this fit in the lore and in Tolkien's Second Age? But I think just to carry on with the news. So this is the second part. Numenorians will attack slash besiege a castle slash castle set, which is occupied by orcs. This set and battle piece had dead fake horses, smoke, and fire. It is unsure currently whether this castle slash stronghold is an orc is belongs to the orcs or is currently being occupied by them. And I think that is the important thing here because it seemed, and just to heads up, just for continuity's sake, it seemed like this was the same army that was fighting in either the earlier or later battle. So, what do you think there's a similar theme we're starting to see here potentially?
Well, I think that if you have a castle and or a stronghold
Yeah,
that
strong.
is full of orcs, and on the other side of that are a bunch of Numenorians, then possibly we could see when the Numenorians started coming back to Middle Earth after being for hundreds of years on being happy on Numenor. And they started to come back to Middle Earth because they heard the rumors about Sauron becoming strong again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this may be, as I said before, if you want to have a cliffhanger for the end of season one, it might just be that they're showing the ships of the Numenorians returning to Middle Earth and fighting to, in the first sense of the first season, maybe as liberators, as someone who are coming to help or to save the humans, the men of Middle Earth. And for that, obviously, would have to have a battle, and that would have to be a huge orc castle and or stronghold to attack. So that
Yeah.
sounds very interesting.
And
Yeah.
Lakiti, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I kind of don't see the Numenorians attacking any permanent orc settlement, going on the offensive, but rather just retaking their own fortress, which obviously means that this would be a continuation of a conflict that will have started earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe
No,
this
no.
could be Londe, Tharabad. I think
Yeah.
there's a few that maybe this could be. But it's interesting that from the leaks we've got, it is a specific mention. It looks like a castle or a fort per se. So it is interesting, and maybe seeing the level of this. Maybe we don't know if it's going to. All we know is that it's going to be attacked. But maybe is this a siege possibly? And that's what it seems like. The orcs are inside the walls, and that's quite an interesting thing. I think that's the first time in a Tolkien visual adaptation we're seeing the orcs getting besieged or something along those lines. Because of course we have Pelennor Fields, and of course in Dale as well in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So that's quite interesting as a side bit anyways. But I think, Marcel, I think the thing that we can take away from this, it does seem like in this first season, and I think the source even said this as a observation, we're getting a lot of Numenorian versus Orc just conflict. Do you think do you think this has any bearing on which direction maybe either Amazon is going or the show is going to be going?
Well, I think what they will have to do, or what they're planning to do, is that they will have to set up 3 or 4 places. I mean, we mentioned, I think we haven't mentioned yet, but to me, The Witcher is a pretty decent fantasy series. Taking the stories that it has and adapting it, and whatever you do, you have to anchor a story to either characters or places. And if we, let's say, Galadriel would be an important place and an important character of the Second Age, then we can follow her story in a sense, or we can follow Armenelos in Numenor, and we can go to maybe Eregion and Celebrimbor, or we can go to Lindon, or we can go to the Numenorians are coming back to Middle Earth, so that people know where they are, because you need to have a focal point. And I think the Numenorians, they are seafaring people, right? So
Yeah.
we will be seeing fleets of ships. We will be seeing the Numenorians preparing to go into battle on their ships. So I think that the thing we're going to see is they will land on some place we've never seen before, but we know the ships, we know the admirals, we know the captains,
Yeah.
and then they will go into battle with something. And that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to see the ships of the Numenorians, because we really haven't seen any of those, but they're going to be amazing and interesting and fascinating.
And I think the thing that you mentioned there that Amazon does have, maybe Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit film trilogies didn't, is having the ability to use ships and have this more seafaring expeditions, because that's what a lot of the Numenorians were earlier on in the Second Age, colonialization. Well, not early on, but in the mid-Second Age, we've got this cruise of colonialization and of even from a recent leak, we know of Loda's boat, which is meant to be from a character that's going to be a character that's going to and from places. So it does seem like, of course, maybe the prevalence of maybe having the Numenorians arrive and land and take back their strongholds, etc., would be quite interesting. And I think after we go through this final piece of news, we'll get right into the nitty-gritty of that discussion. But the final thing that I think will, if you want to take nothing away from this video, if you want to take this bit away, I think a lot of people will be happy with this part. Exclusive, most of the orcs are prosthetic/wetter practical effect orcs, and a lot of the time and money has been spent on the realism of creating these orcs. And just as a side note, this is for the show in general as well. We've been told that, for example, regularly nearly 50,000 New Zealand dollars worth of equipment has been damaged or broken by Amazon workers just by experimenting new stuff, or not either new recorded things, new practical effects, and that happens apparently quite regularly. So I think, Lekid, I'll start with you for this one. Does this make you feel a bit better that now of course, the Hobbit, we don't want to get into that discussion too much, but of course,
yeah,
the orc CGI, but now we're getting the proper practical effect orcs, and of course, to have a full-on battle like we are hearing here, you can't have it all CGI. I think for a sense of realism as well, it would make sense to have them in practical, not in practical effect, in prosthetics as well. So do you think that is a step in the right direction for Amazon?
That's absolutely an encouraging piece of news. I think everybody's a bit wary of overuse of CGI from, the Hobbit films, and just from films in general, like from the last 10 years. And I think it's the film production has been moving into that direction, just going back to the prosthetics and practical effects more and more. So this really, really makes me happy. I'm still hoping we won't get to see too much orcs in this series, especially not the first season. I really don't want, but this is strictly my personal opinion. I don't want this to be too combat focused. But of course, there will need to be some baddies, and as far as they're well made, I'm all up for it.
Indeed, and I think just in general, like we're 12 episodes into the show, and this is the first action leak we have gotten, or battle or fighting leak we got. And for someone who isn't here, but Chen, he would normally say is that, of course, he will repeat this point a lot, that Amazon are going to want to have fighting and have orcs to pull people in. But Marcel, do you think by the Amazon, do you think potentially the use of more practical effects and practical effect orcs, having them having prosthetics, would that help with the realism of the fighting and the battling, etc., possibly?
I remember that Richard Taylor of Weta Workshop once was a guest at Rincon. The film fantasy convention that I co-hosted a couple of years ago in Germany, and he came there and he showed a reel of the work that he'd been doing at the time, and he did practical work there, and you could have a chat with him and talk about what Weta Workshop were doing. And he also talked about what they did with the Hobbit film trilogy in comparison to the Lord of the Rings film trilogy. And he became quite wistful when he talked about the bigatures. These huge miniatures, for example, of Minas Tirith, and how that looked in the Lord of the Rings film trilogy. And he said, obviously he couldn't publicly say, I think that's kind of shit that we're not using them anymore. But he sort of made clear that it was better and easier, and it resulted in better pictures and better scenes when they had practical effects. It worked just so much better, even though the the computer generated imagery is much better now. He said it just gives you a different feel. It just, if you touch a thing, it's just something different from having it in 3D. And it's much better to work with because you can interact with it. You can have people. If you hit an orc that it's like 6'5" and it's in full prosthetics, you will just simply react differently as an actor than
Yeah.
playing at one
Yeah.
of those white ping pong
Yeah.
balls in front of a green screen. So in generally speaking, he said that he sort of preferred doing the practical effect work, and I think that's definitely better than just to have to rely on CGI all the time. No, I'm happy to hear that if what the practical effects are involved, it's always a good thing because they know how to do that.
Indeed, and I
Yeah,
think. Oh, sorry, you're gonna go ahead, Lakitia.
just a short one. I think this is a really, really good point that Marcel raised. I think it's much easier for the actors as well. Like it gives, they give better performances when they're acting against another actor, and when they can actually see what the thing they're reacting to looks like. Go ahead, Fellowship.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what both of you said, I remember that Ian McKellen had, of course, finished filming, acting on the Lord of the Rings, and then he said, then Pete Jackson says, "Hey, come, well, we got the Hobbit now to work on." And he said, "Oh, I'll be happy to reprise my role." And then on the first day of set, about 10 years later, or 7 to 10 years later, I think he's in the scene in Bag End where he has to be in another room with, he has to talk to ping pong balls because of just because of, I think, height perspective compared to all the dwarves, and I think that does have a toll on your acting performance because it's quite hard to act an inanimate object. So yeah, and I think that could be portrayed onto the just the action sequences and how these, for example, the stunt performers who will probably be playing either orcs or Numenorean soldiers will be reacting to each other. So yeah, I think that's a move in the right direction. And
Can I just say something else? And I think Marcel already mentioned something in that direction, but I think, as far as CGI versus practical effects go, even if you apply, if you try to make it more grimy and gritty in post-production, just visual effects, it always looks a little bit more polished than if you actually have a practical effect, as far as I'm concerned. Like the orcs in the Hobbit trilogy, I mean, they were, they made them look gruff and everything, but still everything looked much more artificial, much more, just like an inanimate object in somewhere in a window or something.
Indeed, and just one final thing to mention, I remember the casting, the cost for extras, we've had like 4 or 5 of them, and it's been revamped. If you're weird looking, you've got water in your nose, you've got acne, you've got this and that. So I think that does really make sense now that we are hearing this, how that a lot of the orcs are practical effect. And of course, actually, another thing, was a leak we had a few weeks ago where orcs are raiding this village and the village leader surrenders, so that's another place. It is maybe Lakitia, not best for you, but we are seeing quite an interesting increase in that. But I think
although this could also be the same place, we have
possibly
sometime in the beginning of the season we have this attack by orcs. The villagers move out, and then later on Numenorean army comes, and then they help them retake the village or the fortress or whatever.
Indeed. I think that perfectly goes on to what we're going to do next, Marcel. Lakitia, is the speculation part. And Marcel, I'll hand this over to you first. So, hearing this news is 3,300 years in length, but pinpointing it down to specific points would be interesting. Where do you think this could, the possible examples of places it could be in the Second Age?
Well, I just remembered something that Lakitia mentioned a couple of minutes ago, and it's about, when we talk about this battle and you have Numenorean knights and a Numenorean small army, attacking some orc stronghold, where could we possibly place that? And that she said, I don't really want that season, the first season, to be that battle heavy, to have all of those, action pieces. And I sort of thought, well, the thing is, the first season was done in New Zealand, right? So what they did is they used the beauty of the country, which is, obviously one of the main advantages of filming anything in New Zealand. And I'm trying to imagine a possible first scene set early on when the Edain moved to Numenor, the first 50 years of, traveling across the sea, and then seeing at the horizon Numenor rising out of the sea, and you see the beautiful island, the gift to men. And New Zealand is so beautiful. They will have had the perfect shots just for this. So I'm really looking forward to the first season, really showing us Numenor, showing us a life on Numenor, the society, and the different. We get to know the main characters, the main houses or main families, the nobility. How does the whole society work? How do they get about after being gifted to such an extent? And it's just going to be absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. So I'm so happy that they did that in New Zealand. The Orcs can, they can come in at the end of the first season, when it gets nitty gritty and military and stuff. But let's have the first couple of episodes just showing us the beauty of Numenor.
Indeed, I think.
Please.
I think that's a sentiment that we can all I think agree on as well. But I think, Lakitia, do you think could we see potentially a battle in the War of the Elves and Sauron? Maybe after the fall of the Númenóreans come to save the day for Middle Earth. Do you think we could be seeing around 1617, 1800 of the Second Age?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my first thought was that I couldn't really see this taking place during, the time Anatar is in Eregion, due to the fact that I couldn't just see him, spending the day with Celebrimbor, then popping out to attack some Númenórean villages, and then just, going back for a cup of coffee with Celebrimbor in the evening. But if this indeed takes place like during the war of Sauron and the elves, yeah, could well be just like the moment that the Númenóreans arrive. I think that would be a really nice visual, really dramatic scene. So yeah, sure.
And then what happens, Marcel, maybe because it's speculation, because we don't know, what happens if this is 3100 of the Second Age and Sauron is stirring again in the east and the Númenóreans have to come to face this threat? Could that be a possibility?
Well, the thing is, I'm still stuck on the image that Lakitia just, conjured into my mind about Celebrimbor and Sauron having a cup of coffee in the evening, after leaving the smithy, after doing the hard day's work. And the boys, latte, yeah. Well, a chai latte possibly as well.
Yeah, of course.
I love the idea. Celebrimbor not knowing who he is talking to, and Sauron and Anatar being the teacher, the mentor. We're having such great progress, Celebrimbor. We're sure gonna make it. And I'm so stuck on that right now. I'm sorry. No, it's really they're going to be so many amazing scenes with the Númenóreans, as we mentioned before, maybe retaking a village, in the sense of as liberators, the Númenóreans as saviors for the people in Middle Earth, because it's one of the paragraphs in the Silmarillion and the published Silmarillion on that, Middle Earth and the men there were left to their own devices. And Sauron basically sort of started, taking over again. And then the Númenóreans were sort of asked, to step in and free the people of Middle Earth again. I think that could be a pretty late development, because for the first couple of hundred, even thousands of years, the Númenóreans just stayed among themselves, right? And I think that's the first season, the Númenóreans among themselves. And at the end of it, then we can see the next step going, out into the world and becoming the liberators of Middle Earth again.
Possibly, and I think it fits in either way, wherever we look. And Lakitia, I don't have it on me right now. Could you quickly read out the orc attacking, the Númenóreans attacking the orc castle, please, again, quickly? Sorry for putting on the spot.
Okay, no worries. So Númenóreans will attack a castle occupied by orcs. The set had that fake horses, smoke and fire, so it is unsure whether this castle stronghold is an orc castle or being currently occupied by orcs. This is my brief summary of that whole exclusive, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Marcel, do you have any maybe speculation or initial theories? Of course, it can easily be wrong, but these are what this could potentially be. And I think the main thing is, whose does this castle or fort own to?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we mentioned before that possibly some orcs. I mean, Sauron starts, sending out his armies again, and then he's taking places, and he's getting his, a sway of much larger region of Middle Earth again. And if if they did that, and it used to be some of the men of Middle Earth's places, and the Normans come back to retake them on their way to, laying siege to Mordor and to Sauron. Um, I don't see orcs going about places, building fortresses and garrisons in a strategic manner. So I would assume that this would have to be an older castle or place by men they built, and the orcs simply swamped and overran, and then sort of the Numenorians are called in, as helpers and liberators, and that's what they do, because that's the first step, right? I mean, they never knew about Sauron, they never knew about him getting big again, and then they get the rumors, then they get the news that someone is attacking the men of Middle Earth, and then when the Numenorians swing into action, so it's their job to sort of retake all of the castles that used to be men's castles.
Indeed, and I think that's just one of the things it could possibly be, and I think maybe having it maybe Londir or Tharabad, etc. could be really interesting, because these are coastal Numenorian port cities as well. But I just think, Marcel, final thoughts on this news, all these leaks?
I'm so relieved to sort of really hear that what a workshop and what a practical effects and all of this is involved, because that's definitely one of the reasons why they went to New Zealand, to have Weta Digital and Weta Workshop involved some of the best companies in the world, and who have obviously proven that they can deliver some of the greatest fantasy tales ever written. So that's amazing news. I'm really looking forward to see that in action.
Indeed. And I think we can all share that as well. And what about you, Lakitia?
To be honest, I'm still stuck on Marcel's idea of us getting to know Numenor, like getting to see it rise slowly from the horizon and just getting to see the whole land. So this is the main takeaway from me. Yes, please, I want that.
For me, it's a chai latte of Celebrimbor and Sauron. So there you go.
All right.
And I just think another thing that you want to take, if you want to take away from this video, is that it does seem like there is a lot of Numenorian versus Orcs. Just sequences and battles, it seems like, as well. And it seems like Amazon is really, we know where their budget is going with this as well. Well, some of it, but a lot of it's probably on getting these amazing landscapes like we saw in that Tyrion picture as well. Indeed. But it's been a lovely conversation. Firstly, thank you for Marcel for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Indeed, and hope to have you on again soon, whenever. And also, thank you to Lakitia as usual as well.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thank you, Marcel, for joining us. This was a blast.
Indeed. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please tell us what you think of these recent leaks in the comments below. It's a bit different to what we have been leaking recently. Please like and subscribe. Until the next video, my friends, goodbye.